Urgent update: India must revise its consumer price index immediately. The latest retail inflation data for October has triggered an important debate in India's economic policy framework. The Consumer Price Index, or CPI, reported overall inflation at just 0.25%, the lowest since January 2012. At first glance, this appears to be excellent news, but a deeper look shows that the fall in inflation is not real. It is a statistical anomaly, not a genuine decline in prices. The biggest distortion comes from the food and beverages category, which carries a heavy weight of 46% in the CPI basket. In October 2025, food inflation fell by 3.7%, the sharpest drop in the current CPI series. However, this fall did not occur because food prices dropped. Instead, it was due to the high base of last year, when food inflation stood at 9.7%. This base effect made inflation look negative, even though vegetable prices have risen recently in many markets. Meanwhile, inflation in nearly every other major subgroup, fuel and light, housing, tobacco, and miscellaneous items, was actually higher than last year. Only two groups showed lower inflation: food, due to base effect, and clothing and footwear, where the impact of GST rate cuts has finally begun to appear. This clearly exposes a major problem. India's CPI is outdated. The base year is still 2012, and the consumption weightages no longer reflect today's economy. As a result, the CPI often obscures reality rather than explaining it. The gap between official inflation and public perception proves this. In September, households surveyed by the RBI believed inflation was 7.4%, far higher than the official figure. This mismatch creates challenges for economic governance. The urgency increases because the RBI's Monetary Policy Committee depends on CPI to decide interest rates. In December, the RBI must decide whether to maintain or cut policy rates, but it must do so while handling growth numbers distorted by GST-driven demand and inflation numbers distorted by faulty CPI calculations. The Ministry of Statistics has announced that a revised CPI series will be released in the first quarter of the next financial year. For accurate policymaking, this revision cannot come soon enough.